The lights on the bridge of the Peregrine dimmed as Captain Mira Hayes surveyed the holographic display before her. The towering image of Emperor Zorith glared down at her, his golden eyes aflame with contempt. Shackled in reinforced cuffs, his regal armor tarnished by his capture, the Emperor's presence still commanded a room, even through a projection. "You dare detain me?" Zoritha's voice was a low, venomous growl. "Do you understand what you've unleashed, human? My fleets will rain fire on your worlds. Surrender me now, and I may show mercy." Mira straightened, her expression unreadable. "Mercy? Like the mercy you showed on Helios Prime? On Corinth Station?" She took a measured step forward, her tone steady but laced with defiance. "We didn't come this far to cower before tyrants. You'll answer for the billions who died under your rule." A tense silence hung in the air, broken only by the hum of the ship's systems. The bridge crew, seated at their stations, exchanged uneasy glances but remained focused. Myra's second-in-command, Lieutenant Arun Patel, leaned in close. "Captain, the Empire's response will be swift. We've lit a powder keg." "I know," Mira replied quietly, her gaze fixed on the Emperor's hologram. The alarms broke the uneasy calm, a shrill reminder of the danger closing in. The tactical officer, Ensign Dahl, spoke up, his voice tight with urgency. "Admiral Zeeker's fleet has entered orbit, Captain. 15 ships, all armed to the teeth. They're demanding we release the Emperor immediately." "Send the demands to my console," Mira said, her voice cutting through the rising tension. She turned to Arun. "Prepare the crew for potential engagement. Full battle stations." "Yes, ma'am," Arun said, snapping to attention. The hologram flickered, replaced by the image of Admiral Varric Zeeker. His face, lined with age and hardened by decades of war, filled the screen. "Captain Hayes," he began, his voice cold and deliberate. "Your insolence is staggering. You've kidnapped our Emperor, a declaration of war. I suggest you reconsider your position before it's too late." Mira met his gaze with unflinching resolve. "Admiral Zeeker, humanity has endured your Empire's oppression for too long. Your Emperor stands accused of genocide, and we demand justice. If you're here to negotiate, we'll listen. If not..." Zeeker's lip curled in disdain. "Negotiation? There will be no negotiation. You've made your choice. Prepare to face the full might of the Empire." The transmission cut abruptly. The bridge fell silent, save for the persistent hum of the ship's systems. Mira exhaled slowly, her mind racing. "Status report," she ordered. Ensign Dahl's fingers flew across his console. "Their fleet is positioning around us. No signs of immediate attack, but they're locking us in." "Good," Mira said, her voice calm. "Let them think we're trapped." She turned to the engineering station, where Commander Elara Voss was already running diagnostics. "Elara, I need shields at maximum and weapons hot. Can we outlast them if it comes to a fight?" Elara glanced up, her sharp features framed by a halo of red hair. "Our shielding is state-of-the-art, but against 15 Imperial ships? We won't last long in a prolonged engagement." Mira nodded, her expression grim but determined. "Understood. Let's make sure it doesn't come to that." Arun approached, his tone low. "Captain, we need to consider contingencies. If they breach the ship, the Emperor becomes a liability. They'll prioritize him over us." Myra's jaw tightened. "He stays on this ship until we've secured concessions. We're not handing him over just because they bark louder than we do." Arun hesitated but nodded. "Aye, Captain." The tactical display lit up with new alerts. "Incoming transmission," Dahl announced. It was Zorith again, now speaking from his cell. "Captain Hayes," he began, his tone mocking. "Do you truly believe your defiance will amount to anything? You're a speck in the cosmos. Your people will be nothing but a footnote in our history." Mira activated the intercom to respond. "We'll see about that. For now, I suggest you get comfortable. This might take a while." She ended the connection before he could reply. The bridge shuddered slightly as the first salvo of energy blasts impacted the ship's shields. They're testing our defenses, Elara reported. Shields holding at 98%. Let them test, Mira said. It's a warning shot, nothing more. They're trying to intimidate us. The crew worked in tense synchronization, each member focused on their role. Mira paced the bridge, her mind cycling through scenarios. Retreat wasn't an option. Neither was surrender. Minutes stretched into an eternity before Arun approached again. Captain, the crew is holding steady, but morale is strained. A message might help. Mira nodded. She tapped a control panel, opening a ship-wide broadcast. Crew of the Peregrine, she began, her voice firm but steady. I know the odds we face. I know the fear that comes with standing against a force as overwhelming as the Empire. But I also know this, we are not just fighting for ourselves. We are fighting for every human who has ever been crushed under their rule. For every colony that's burned. For every voice that's been silenced. This is our stand. Not as victims, but as equals. We may be outnumbered, but we are not outmatched. We are the Peregrine. We are humanity's shield. And we will not break. As her words echoed through the ship, Mira glanced at Arun, who offered a small nod of approval. The tactical display flared again. Admiral Zeker's fleet is shifting position, Dahl reported. They're tightening the blockade. Myra's heart pounded, but her expression remained calm. Let them come, she said softly. We'll make them regret underestimating us. As the bridge settled into a tense rhythm, Mira returned to her command chair, her mind focused on the battle ahead. The galaxy might see humanity as an underdog, but Mira Hayes knew one truth above all: humanity's spirit was unbreakable. The low thrum of the Peregrine's engines filled the briefing room as Captain Mira Hayes studied the tactical hologram. The Empire's fleet hovered like a pack of wolves just beyond the ship's range, their formation tight and unyielding. Mira traced her finger across the display, mentally calculating escape routes that seemed increasingly impossible. Options, people, she said, breaking the heavy silence. Around the table, her senior officers exchanged uncertain glances. Lieutenant Arun Patel cleared his throat. Their blockade is airtight. Any attempt to break through would result in immediate engagement. Arun began, his tone grim. Even with our shields, we'd last minutes at best. Commander Elara Voss leaned forward, her sharp gaze fixed on Mira. Our cloaking system might buy us some time. It won't hold indefinitely, but if we move carefully, we could slip past their perimeter. Mira considered this, her jaw tightening. And once we're out? What's our next move? Arun tapped a few controls, pulling up a star map. There are rumors of anti-imperial factions in the outer territories. If we can make contact, they might be willing to aid us, or at least provide temporary refuge. Might being the operative word, Elara interjected. We'd be putting everything on a gamble, Captain. There's no guarantee these factions would trust us, let alone help us. Mira leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Every path seemed fraught with peril, but sitting idle wasn't an option. The Empire wouldn't wait forever. Sooner or later, Admiral Zeker would strike. We take the risk, Mira decided, her voice resolute. Prep the cloaking system and plot a course to the outer rim. Arun, draft a message to the crew. They need to understand what's at stake. Arun nodded. Yes, ma'am. Elara hesitated. Captain, one more thing. If they catch us while cloaked, it'll be game over. The system isn't built for prolonged use under high stress. I understand, Mira said. But this isn't just about us anymore. If we fall here, humanity loses its chance to stand up to the Empire. Failure isn't an option. The officers dispersed, each consumed with their tasks. Mira lingered for a moment, staring at the star map. The weight of command pressed heavy on her shoulders, but she pushed the doubt aside. There was no room for hesitation. The bridge was bathed in dim blue light as the Peregrine engaged its cloaking field. The familiar view of the Empire's blockade dissolved into the void as the ship's systems rendered them invisible to enemy sensors. Cloaking field stable, Elara reported from the engineering console. For now. Mira nodded, her eyes fixed on the viewport. Take us out, slow and steady. I don't want so much as a ripple on their sensors. Ensign Dahl guided the ship with painstaking precision, his hands steady despite the sweat beading on his brow. The silence on the bridge was oppressive, broken only by the occasional status update from the crew. They're holding position, Arun said, monitoring the fleet's movements. No sign they've noticed us. Myra's grip on the armrest tightened as they inched closer to the blockade's edge. Each second felt like an eternity, every subtle shift of the ship a potential disaster. Finally Dahl spoke. We're clear of their perimeter. A collective exhale rippled through the crew, but Mira remained focused. Good work. Alara, keep the cloak active until we're well out of their sensor range. Arun, what's our ETA to the outer territories? 4 hours at current speed, Arun replied. Assuming no complications. Let's hope we're that lucky, Mira muttered. 2 hours later, Mira sat in her quarters, reviewing intelligence reports. A soft chime at the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called. Alara stepped inside, her expression uncharacteristically somber. Captain, we need to talk. Mira gestured for her to sit. What's on your mind? The cloak, Alara began, folding her hands in her lap. It's holding, but I've noticed fluctuations. Minor for now, but if we push it too hard, it could fail. Mira finished, her voice flat. Alara nodded. I'm doing everything I can, but this system wasn't designed for extended use in hostile territory. We're running on borrowed time. Mira leaned back, her gaze distant. If it fails, we'll deal with it. Right now, it's the only thing keeping us alive. Alara hesitated, then leaned forward. Mira, I've served under a lot of captains, but none like you. Whatever happens out there, I want you to know, I trust your judgment. Mira met her gaze, a rare flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. Thank you, Alara. That means more than you know. As they approached the outer rim, a sudden alarm shattered the relative calm. Mira rushed to the bridge, her heart pounding. What's happening? She demanded. Dahl's hands flew over the controls. Imperial drones, Captain. 3 of them. They're scanning for cloaked vessels. How close? Mira asked. Too close, Alara replied grimly. If they pass within 100 meters, they'll detect us. Myra's mind raced. Arun, options? We could divert course, but it'd take us closer to the core worlds. Higher risk of running into another patrol. Not an option, Mira said. She turned to Alara. What if we disrupt their sensors? Something subtle, enough to throw them off without giving away our position? Alara frowned, considering. I can overload the cloak's signal emitter, create a distortion field. It might confuse them, briefly. Do it, Mira ordered. And make it quick. Alara worked with feverish speed, her fingers a blur on the console. Moments later, the drone's paths began to shift erratically. They're confused, Arun reported. But they're not leaving. They will, Mira said. Dahl, bring us closer to that asteroid field. Slowly. The ship glided into the dense cluster of rocks, each movement calculated to avoid detection. The drones lingered for what felt like an eternity before finally veering off. They're moving away, Arun confirmed, relief evident in his voice. Good, Mira said, though her shoulders remained tense. Alara, how's the cloak? Stable for now, Alara replied, but her tone carried a warning. We're cutting it close, Captain. Mira nodded. Let's not push our luck. Full speed to the outer rim. Hours later, the Peregrine arrived at the coordinates Arun had identified. The crew's exhaustion was palpable, but Myra's focus remained razor-sharp. We've entered the designated sector, Arun said. No signs of Imperial activity. Let's keep it that way, Mira replied. Broadcast a wideband signal. Encrypt it. Use the code we intercepted from the rebel networks. As the message was transmitted, Mira felt a flicker of hope. Somewhere out there, humanity's allies, or its betrayers, awaited. The vast emptiness of the outer rim stretched before them, its stars scattered like faint whispers against the darkness. The tension aboard the Peregrine was palpable as the ship drifted silently, its cloaking field still active but weakening with each passing hour. Signal broadcasted, Arun reported from his station. Encrypted and on all rebel frequencies we've intercepted. Mira stood at the center of the bridge, arms crossed, her gaze fixed on the shimmering holographic display. The encoded message hung in the void, a beacon of hope, or a lure for Imperial forces. How long before we can expect a response? She asked. It's impossible to say, Arun replied. If there are rebel cells in this sector, they'll need time to verify our intentions. Elara's voice cut through the tension. And if there aren't any rebels, we've just painted a target on ourselves. Mira acknowledged the risk with a nod. We'll hold position for 2 hours. If we don't get a response, we move on. The minutes crawled by, the silence on the bridge broken only by the occasional hum of machinery. Mira paced behind the command console, her mind a whirlwind of calculations and contingencies. Every scenario ended with the same question: was this the right call? Captain, Dahl called out, his voice tinged with urgency. We're picking up a signal. It's faint but directed at us. Mira stepped forward, her pulse quickening. Patch it through. The speakers crackled, the distortion heavy, but a voice emerged, a deep, gravelly tone that carried an edge of caution. Unidentified vessel, this is the Iron Flare. State your intentions immediately, or we will engage. Mira exchanged a glance with Arun before activating the comm. This is Captain Mira Hayes of the Peregrine. We come in peace, seeking an alliance against the Empire. There was a long pause, the kind that made every heartbeat feel like a drumbeat of dread. Finally, the voice returned, sharper this time. And why should we trust you, Captain Hayes? The last ship claiming peace carried an Imperial tracking beacon. We've risked everything to be here, Mira replied, her tone unwavering. We've captured Emperor Zorith, and we're holding him aboard this ship. If that doesn't prove our commitment to the cause, I don't know what will. Another pause. This time, the tension was electric. When the voice returned, it was filled with disbelief. You have the Emperor? We do, Mira said. And we're not handing him over to the Empire. But we need allies if we're going to make it out of this alive. The calm went silent for several agonizing seconds before a new voice, calmer and more authoritative, broke in. Captain Hayes, this is Commander Tarek of the Iron Flare. Power down your cloaking field and follow our coordinates. Any sign of treachery, and we'll obliterate you before you can blink. Mira hesitated. Dropping the cloak was a risk, but she knew there was no other way forward. Understood, she said. Sending coordinates to navigation. We'll follow your lead. The coordinates led them to a massive asteroid field, its jagged rocks illuminated by the dim glow of a dying star. Nestled within the shadows of the largest asteroid was a cluster of ships, an eclectic mix of freighters, cruisers, and retrofitted warships. The Iron Flare, a hulking black vessel bristling with weaponry, dominated the formation. They weren't kidding about obliterating us, Arun muttered, eyeing the array of cannons pointed directly at the Peregrine. Mira ignored the comment, her focus on the task at hand. Bring us in slowly. No sudden moves. As the Peregrine approached, the comm crackled to life again. You're clear to dock, Peregrine. Keep your crew aboard until we've had a chance to debrief. Acknowledged, Mira replied. She turned to her officers. Stay alert. We don't know what we're walking into. The docking maneuver was smooth, but the tension remained as Mira and a small delegation made their way to the airlock. Arun and Elara flanked her, their sidearms holstered but within easy reach. The airlock hissed open, revealing a group of armed rebels. At their center stood Commander Tarek, a tall man with weathered features and piercing gray eyes. He studied Mira with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Welcome to the Iron Flare, Tarek said, his voice steady but guarded. You've certainly brought an interesting story with you. Mira met his gaze. And an even more interesting bargaining chip. But before we talk about Zorith, I need to know, are you willing to fight? Tarek smirked, a hint of amusement breaking through his stoicism. You don't waste time, do you? Let's take this to the war room. The war room was a stark, utilitarian space dominated by a circular table and a holographic projector. As Tarek activated the display, a three-dimensional map of the outer rim filled the room, dotted with red markers indicating Imperial presence. Your capture of Zorith has caused quite a stir, Tarek began. Imperial fleets are mobilizing, and every bounty hunter in the galaxy is gunning for you. That makes you both an asset and a liability. We didn't come here to hide, Mira said. We came to turn the tide. With Zorith as leverage, we can force the Empire to the negotiating table, or cripple them by exposing their crimes. A murmur rippled through the assembled rebels. Tarek's expression remained unreadable. And what do you want from us? Support, Mira replied. Ships, resources, intelligence. We can't do this alone, and neither can you. Together, we have a chance. Tarek leaned back, his gaze appraising. You're bold, Captain Hayes. I'll give you that. But boldness doesn't win wars. We've been fighting the Empire for decades, and all we've managed is survival. Survival isn't enough, Mira said, her voice rising with conviction. Not anymore. The galaxy needs hope. It needs to see that the Empire isn't invincible. That's what this fight is about. Tarek studied her for a long moment, then turned to his officers. Thoughts? A younger rebel, her hair shaved close to the scalp, spoke up. If what she's saying is true, this could be the opening we've been waiting for. But if it's a trap... It's not, Mira interjected. You have my word. Tarek nodded slowly. Your word will have to do for now. We'll provide temporary sanctuary and assess the situation. But if you endanger my people, I'll end this alliance before it starts. Fair enough, Mira said, extending a hand. Tarek hesitated, then shook it. Welcome to the Resistance, Captain Hayes, he said, a faint smile breaking through. Let's hope you're worth the risk.